everyone. It's Beth Sager with the Lex Local. Today we're talking to Bob Atkins, who represents a group of parents who are interested in making sure we get a great field house with this new high school. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Okay,
right.
take it away.
Yeah. So, as probably everybody knows, the town is in the process of planning for a new school. So that's a big deal. Um, what's emerging as one of the more sort of controversial issues in that is actually the field house. And maybe we could talk a little bit later about why that's controversial. What are the issues there? As you imagine, one of them is cost.
Right.
But first, what I thought I'd do is just a little background on the field house and why, a new field house is needed. So we do have a field house. We were very fortunate to have a field house as a high school and as a town. It was actually one of the first in a public high school in the country when it was built in the 60s. It's now 60 years old. And really the big problem, though, is it's not really right sized to the programs today. Right? When it was built, the track program, as an example, was 37 boys. And level of competition was not as high. They didn't compete in as many events. You roll forward to today, and there's over 200 boys and girls, very diverse program. It's the only non-cut sport at Lexington High School. And the field house is simply not sized for that many kids.
Right.
Just to sort of, emphasize that. So here's our model, if you will, of the field house. The field house at Lexington is round.
Round.
So here's our round field house. And there are 37 athletes there. And so, that's what that field house looked like in 1965, right? Okay. If we roll forward to today, this is what's gone on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I think you can see the problem, right?
Yeah.
And so that's actually not even really the quite 220. I ate a few. I counted them out, but yeah. And so this is just the track program.
Right.
Of course, the field house gets used by many of the athletic sports, basketball, baseball, lacrosse, etc. Right? It gets used for PE. Beyond the school, it's a town resource. The recreation department uses it. Town groups use it for things like fairs and the like. So it's really a multi-purpose sort of facility. And if you look across all those uses, it's undersized. And this is really no different than what's going on with the school, right? So that, part of the reason for building a new school is it's old, but part of the reason also is its size for, I think, roughly 1,800 somewhat students. We're now up to, I think, 2,300 something, with the number growing. And so the plan is, look, we need a school that's right sized, and we need a field house that's right sized and fits all the M&Ms. So seems like that should be a no-brainer. Like, what's the problem? What's the controversy, right? And again, I think part of that comes back to cost. So the correct size field house, I think there's sort of an agreement that it's sort of a 72,000 square foot facility with what is now sort of standard is a 6-lane, 200-meter track, right? Which is a significantly bigger track than what's in the current field house, right? The architects that are working with the town have priced that at roughly $80 million, right? I think 79 million is the actual number. So just to kind of illustrate that, so if each of these blocks is 10 million, all right. So here's what the architects are saying, right? They're basically saying, see if I count here correctly.
I like your visuals. I like a person with visuals.
Well, I'll show you in a minute why I'm doing this. So I think if I get that right,
yeah,
so
that's
and I only have one size block, so we'll round up to 80 million. So $80 million. So we looked at that and we said, that's a lot of money. That seems like more than a field house, which is kind of a big warehouse.
Right. It's kind of empty on the inside, basically.
Should cost, right? This ends up being $1,100 a square foot, right? Which is a pretty significant price. So we did what anybody, I'm sure you do, is we look for comps.
Right.
So it turns out that one of the ones we found is Williams College out of the western part of the state.
Okay.
They're building a field house right now with a 200-meter track, kind of like what we want. And they are building it for the cost of $30 million.
Wow.
So
That's
it's like,
ridiculous.
what is going on
Right,
here,
right?
They're doing it for $30 million.
Right.
And,
Let's get those guys.
Lexington is saying
maybe they could build the whole high school too.
So in fairness, let me sort of explain a little bit of what's going on and how you get from 30 million to 80 million. And of course, part of the reason to do that is there's some choices in there, right? So the first thing is that the Williams College example, it has a 200-meter track, but it's a 3-lane track.
Okay.
6-lane is more the standard, more what you'd expect for all those M&Ms.
Right.
And so, you need a little bit bigger building to accommodate a 6-lane track. And so what that pushes you from is like a 55,000 square foot building to a 72,000 square foot building. And if you just scale based on the area, you're up to 40 million.
Mm-hmm.
Still seems like a pretty big difference.
Good deal.
So the next thing is that Williams College has the advantage that they're private.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can do private construction.
Mm.
Lexington cannot, right? And the difference typically between a private project and a public project is the public project costs 25% more. You might ask, so why is that?
I know, it's crazy.
And the simple answer is it's bureaucracy.
Right.
Private, public, I still have to follow a certain number of rules, building codes, etc. But on the public side, there's a whole lot of other rules that I have to follow, and that comes with cost. And that cost is, again, typically like 25%, right? So that brings us from 40 million to 50 million.
Right.
Okay. So the next problem is that's what it would cost if I were building it right now. But Lexington's not going to build it right now. We're going to build it in about 4 years.
Right.
Right. And we have this thing called inflation.
Yes, we do.
And the architects that are doing the school project have a model for what that inflation looks like. If you add it up over those 14 years, it's about 14%.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that does is it pushes you from 50 million to, I'll round up a little bit and call it 60 million.
Mm.
Now it turns out that 60 million is about what you could in fact build a basic field house for. And one of the things that we've done is we've gone to a different set of architects and we've asked them what would the cost be. And they've come back with a number for a basic field house, 72,000 square foot, of $60 million.
Mm-hmm.
So still,
20 million.
20 million matters, right? So
make a difference in my life.
So what's going on? So that's a basic field house. What Lexington is looking for in the new school is LEED Gold. And of course, everybody understands the reasons for that, and conservation is important. Although I will say that my understanding is there's a lot of trends pushing back against the LEED certification in the sense that it doesn't always correlate that well with actual conservation,
mm-hmm.
right? There's ways to game the system and get the points and the like. But we asked those same architects, well, what if I wanted LEED Gold? And so they gave us a price for that, and that's 70 million. Right. And then the final difference is that the way these architects would do it is a pre-engineered building, right? So pre-engineered steel. Typically, pre-engineered steel buildings have a lifespan of 50 to 100 years. It's actually, in some ways, an easier to maintain building than brick and mortar. But you do have to maintain it. If you do that, typically mm-hmm. you could get 100 years out of it. But the way Lexington is choosing with the school to build is brick and mortar, which gives you a base 75-year lifespan, mm-hmm. right? And if you want to go to brick and mortar,
there you go.
That pushes the cost to 80 million, right? So part of the reason for doing this is to illustrate there are choices here, right? Uh, Most people across the country building an athletic facility like this would do pre-engineered.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if you made that choice, it would come down to 70 million, right? Uh, Again, conservation is important, but maybe LEED Silver Plus is enough,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's some ways to get the most actual conservation features out with actually all the costs associated with LEED Gold, and that's a choice to be made. And then finally, what if some private funding was found?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it turns out it's now a thing to sell naming rights to secondary school athletic facilities. And
Mm.
there are brands that are interested in that. Lexington is somewhat attractive in that I think we're like the third most visited community in the state from a tourism perspective,
Mm-hmm.
thanks to our heritage. This facility would be a 5-minute walk from Battle Green
Right.
on a major road, and there'd be opportunity to get your brand or name on the building for 50 to 100 years.
Right.
And so, what if somebody was willing to pay for that? Uh, so the point here is that there's room to be creative and value
Right.
engineer, and that's what we're trying to encourage here. Again, we feel like to support all those M&Ms, it needs to be a bigger building uh, for the school and for the town.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is how to
And
do it
they're
right.
not including this in the base, right?
Yes. So that brings to the second controversial point about the field house that I'll mention quickly, which is uh, unfortunately the Mass School Building Authority, which is the state agency that supports and
Right.
subsidizes towns to build new schools. They won't contribute to a field house.
They won't contribute to a pool either, which is kind of my pet cause. But
And in fact, they're not. They have a cap on what they'll contribute, and Lexington School is expensive enough that we hit
mm,
that cap well before we're done, right? And so, uh, you know, typically the contributions are 30%. I think in the case of the high school, it would be more like 15%
mm,
because of that. But one of their rules is if you're going to do a field house, it needs to be a completely separate project.
mm,
It sort of can be the same project, but separate project to them means that when you go to the town for an override vote, it has to be a separate vote.
mm-hmm,
And there is a lot of concern about a second vote.
mm,
We vote yes for the school, we vote no for the field house as a town, and that the school would be left with no field house at all,
mm-hmm,
right? And I think that some of those risks are driving the thinking to not build a new field house,
right.
but instead to renovate what we have, despite the fact that it doesn't really fit what we need. It turns out by renovating, you could put it in the one vote,
Oh.
and so that risk kind of goes away.
Mm,
So I think there's a few takeaways that we're pushing. One is that again, I think a bigger facility is needed. I think there are some important trades and create room for creativity
right.
in creating that. And I think the third is that we need to inform and trust the folks in Lexington to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I think Lexington has always done the right thing. And I think the hope is that they would hear again.
Well, you made a compelling argument with the M&Ms and the blocks. So, yeah, great. Well, let's hope they do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity
Yeah, no,
to
thank you
talk
for your
about this.
time.
And
So why are you passionate about it? Do you have runners? Were you a
I,
runner?
I was not a runner. My two kids, they're both in college now, but they were both runners at
Okay.
Lexington, and the track and field program there is amazing. It's one of the largest in the state.
Right.
The coaches are phenomenal, uh, and yeah, I think that the real opportunity is that as a non-cut sport,
Right.
and it's truly it's a non-cut sport in the fact that you could be the slowest kid on the team and you still get to compete,
Right.
right? And not only do you get to compete, but you get to compete with yourself,
Right.
right? To improve and get better over the year, and it's about that. as much as it is putting points on the board
No,
for a
it's
team.
true. It's true. The not, the whole cutting at Lexington High, where there's so many kids, makes it really tricky. I mean, they used to not cut for swimming either, but then the pool situation got so bad, and they had to cut. Like,
Yeah.
you want your kids to be able to play a competitive sport if that's what they like, right? So what can people do to help support this?
Yeah. So I think it's show up at some of the community forums and voice support for a right-sized facility. I think one of the critical things that's happening in November is there's a major decision. Um, in November, they decide what to bring forward in the architectural process into schematic design. And if a larger field house does not go forward at that point as at least an option, you can still decide not to do it later, but if it's not carried forward, uh, it will be dead, right? And we will be in a undersized facility that has this problem for the next 75 years. And so I think we are trying to reach the school committee, the school building committee, the select board, with the message that, look, it's really important to do what we've always done here in Lexington in the past, and do the right thing, be a leader in terms of facilities and the like for the town.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you again. Yep.